welcome to this edition of Stream On. I'm Jim Williams, your host, and today we're going to look at something that, 5, 10 years ago, we never would have thought would happen, and that is sports gaming not only being talked about in great depth on television, which that's been on and off for a number of years, but the embracing of the sports gambling community and wagering now is part, frankly, of mainstream. When you've got ESPN, when you've got CBS and NBC and a number of different streaming partners all involved in having shows that basically deal with point spreads and talking about the games and really engaging in sports gaming, that's a change. I mean, that's a seismic change over how things used to be. I mean, you could never, it's always a wink and a nod as to, who was favored and by what, and then the numbers and the whole routine. But that's not the case anymore. Now it is absolutely, totally easy to do. And most of those of us who stream know that there's a number of different places where it's being showcased. As I said before, ESPN does it, Fox, NBC, CBS, and of course, a number of the streaming services have gaming aspects. So with that in mind, my guest is Scott Steehn. Now, Scott is the Director of Communications and the lead handicapper for one of my favorite sites, winnersandwhiners.com. And we're going to talk to Scott, the aforementioned guest, about the changes that we've seen in our lifetime from talking about sports on mainstream TV or radio as being forbidden, and now it's just everyday and average. So, Scott, my friend, things have changed over the years. Let's talk about what's going on right now in the sports gaming business and how ESPN, Fox, CBS, and NBC are not only not hiding it, they're benefiting from it, as are the leagues.
Sure, be happy to. Well, I wouldn't say they've done a complete 180, but they've at least done about a 175. They're getting really close. One of the most famous quotes was ex-commissioner Paul Tagliabue. They asked him when there would be eventually an NFL team in Las Vegas. He said, "Not in my lifetime." Mm-hmm. So luckily, Mr. Tagliabue is still alive to see the Las Vegas Raiders. But, Jim, once they decided to get rid of the PASPA, which was basically the compact that kept the states from enacting their own gambling laws. Once that was ruled unconstitutional, it has been not quite breakneck speed of the leagues to embrace it, but it has been very close. They have kind of had selective recall about their anti-gambling stance over the last 50 to 100 years since those leagues have been around. So it's been pretty mind-numbing to watch here in the last 4 or 5 years a complete about face as far as embracing gambling, and they've all done it. All the leagues now have partnerships with various sports books or sports betting entities, and a lot of individual teams are cutting their own deals as well.
It's funny, as we speak this morning, on the 1st of October, there's 28 states now that have legalized sports gaming in their states, with another 5 states either with bills pending or bills that they've passed that are in some way, shape, or form, for the moment, stalled. There's some lawsuits and such, but the old theory of the case is that eventually you'll get to that. Eventually, we'll push beyond somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 35 states that are allowing it. But to your point, right now in the District of Columbia, if you wish to bet on a Washington Capitals game or a Washington Wizards basketball game, you can literally do it in the arena where the team plays. They actually have a sports book in the arena, and the team will be sporting this year on their jerseys a you know a logo from one of the gaming companies from Caesars. Meanwhile, across town over at Nationals Park for this last weekend of the season, they'll be opening their BetMGM um, spot, which will be again in the building. And again, the idea that you can literally now walk into a professional sports venue while the game is being played or before the game is being played and make wagers is just, it's mind numbing to me, but it's where we are right now.
I totally agree. Even that holiest of holy cathedrals in baseball, Wrigley Field, is
Hmm.
partnering with DraftKings, and they're going to have a brand new sports book basically in Wrigley Field that's going to open the season after next. So
Hmm.
it has come full circle. And Jim, you kind of brought up an interesting point. One
Yeah.
of the biggest controversies and things still left to sort out is who owns the live information,
Hmm.
because live betting is the wave of the future. It's taken over Europe. Probably 70 to 75% of the action or the bets that are made in Europe on soccer right now are
Yeah.
made in game. So they have to sort out, and I don't know if it's going to be through laws or through legislation that is enacted by each individual state, or how it's actually going to work. But someone owns that up to date information. In other words, if I'm sitting at a game at Wrigley Field with my phone and an
Right.
app, I see what's happening in real time. I can make plays. But if I'm sitting at my desk here in Missouri and I want to make a play on that Cubs game or the Nationals game, like you said,
Hmm.
somebody owns that information that's going to reach my desk in a timely fashion. And there's a big fight about who owns that information. Is it the team? Is it the league? Is it a third party? Can anyone that's going to the game, if I'm a DraftKings representative and they're paying me, can I just sit in the stands and send that information out? Who owns that information? And that's
Yeah,
going to be
that
probably the
you
next big fight on the horizon.
the part of the where it is right now, and I'm putting my sports business hat back on, is that the content is owned by the league. Okay, whether it's a National Football League, Major League Baseball League, you know, pick a league, it's owned by the league,
Right.
and the distribution of it is handled on a local basis. The distribution then goes to whomever the home team is. Okay, so we'll take the theory of the case being that you're in Missouri. Let's say that you're at a Cardinals game. Okay, you're watching it. It is a made. If I'm watching it in my home in the greater Washington D.C. area, then my clearance, if you will, comes through the league. If, however, I'm watching it in St. Louis or the St. Louis ADI or the St. Louis region, meaning we all have there's the region between St. Louis and Kansas City and the Cubs and all that. It's you have a territorial rights. It may be 6 states, it may be 5 states. I'm not really sure at the
Right.
moment, up to date on what the Cardinals have, but to carry this through, then whomever the Cardinals have deemed as their representative, let's just for the sake of argument, because they have Bally Sports as their regional sports network. Well, let's just say it's Bally's, okay? Then you can only wager if you're wagering through Bally's.
Right. That's why they bought up all they bought up all the regional Fox networks,
Right. They got
because
28 of them.
their ultimate plan is to have everyone be able to have the ability to interactively bet on any game they're watching on the Bally network.
Right. And that's why the second screen, meaning your tablet or your phone, becomes so crucial to them allowing, because right now, uh, if you if you're not a cable subscriber and you're in the greater St. Louis area, you can't get the Cardinals games unless you subscribe to some service that that provides it to you. In other words, it could be I think if I'm not mistaken, YouTube TV carries some of the regional sports networks. I don't know if they carry all of them. Hulu TV does, and then of course all the cable stations. I mean, it's all the cable networks, all the cable systems. I'm trying to say do as well. So yeah, it does. It does kind of muddy the mix. But explain when you talk about in-game betting, what exactly that is.
Well, it's based on the simple premise that as the game goes along, gameplay dictates a change in the odds. We'll take the most recent NFL game, the Cincinnati game against the Jacksonville Jaguars. That opened up as the uh, Bengals as a 7.5 point or 8.5 point favorite, depending on when you got it. As that game started, the Bengals had a terrible first half. They went scoreless. Meanwhile, Jacksonville scores 14 points. So as you go, if you want to make a wager on that game, you're no longer able to get Jacksonville plus the 7.5 points. Now all of a sudden, because Jacksonville has that 14-0 lead, you have to give away points. You want to bet Jacksonville, now you have to give away 4 points, 7 points, whatever that line happens to be at the time. And it changes literally every play. One team has an advantage if they have a 20-yard pass completion, then the odds on that team are going to be a little bit steeper. If they have a sack and they're facing 3rd and 19, then it goes the other way. So that's how in-game wagering works. You make a current wager based on the gameplay that's already happened and occurred, and those odds are always fluctuating. They fluctuate pitch by pitch in baseball, possession by possession in basketball and hockey, and play by play in football. So those odds are constantly changing, and it actually creates a bit of a dilemma for cord cutters like myself. I actually have YouTube TV,
Hmm.
and because we're streaming as opposed to cable, I'm running, depending on the night, depending on the feed, I run about 20 to 30 seconds behind where they are on cable, which
Hmm.
nobody if you're watching it as a consumer and you're just watching it for the love of the game, you don't
Right.
care if you're 30
Right.
seconds behind. If I want to make a wager, that can be a huge thing, because if I'm getting ready to make a bet on a certain team and they have the ball, I make the bet, all of a sudden they throw an interception, it goes back the other way for a pick six, then I've got a bad number, and I've got the worst of it in that play. And that is, as a professional gambler, that's something that you never want to do.
I was thinking exactly what you're talking about, and I'm thinking 30 seconds. Okay, 30 seconds in, say, college basketball or pro basketball, a guy's at the free throw line. He could have missed both free throws or made both free throws, and
Sure.
they're waiting to make that, to turn on a dime and make that decision.
Sure,
Uh,
or if somebody picks up their 4th foul and they have to
right.
sit out significant time. And the leagues, they would like nothing better. They're asserting their rights, just like you talked about with the
Hmm.
broadcast rights.
Right.
Everybody hears that disclaimer. This major league game is processed only by provision of Major League Baseball and the Kansas City Royals or St. Louis Cardinals, any
Right.
other distribution, et cetera, et cetera.
Hmm.
So they want that to be a natural extension of their broadcast rights with the information. And that's,
Right.
so far in Europe, that's not the way it's worked out. There's been separate companies that
Hmm.
have signed up to disseminate that information. So it's going to be, I think, ultimately, like so many things, it's probably going to have to play out via via the course, and we'll see, because the NBA actually has a deal in place with a company out of France called FDJ. It's Francois Desjeux, and they're the France's national lottery operator, but they've also gotten into the dissemination of in-game information, and they actually have a deal with the NBA as the exclusive provider of that information.
Well, so many things. They basically evolve over a period of time, and my guess is that what's going to happen is that they're going to do what you're talking about. There's got to be a clearinghouse for this. You can't have 7 8 different you know uh, people involved with the content.
Right.
And if they're providing the content for you, they can provide content in real time, which could come to your phone, regardless of whether you're watching the game on, cable or streaming it or however you're consuming it. Um, they can get you that real time information.
Yep.
And that,
That's absolutely true.
yeah, that probably, you know, again, it's an evolution, and we're just in, we're not even in the first quarter. We're basically in practice at this point in the
Right.
streaming situation, and how things are going to be, consumed. And I think that's where we're gonna see that move, which is pretty amazing. And you know, we now see with this talking about the streaming services. The streaming services are partnering up with a number of different uh, gaming organizations so that you'll have in-game stats. You'll have the ability to, uh, in real time, follow all of the games that you might be, interested in, all at one time. And again, all in one area. So, not that you necessarily would be able to switch, but at the very least, you're going to know, you know, information that you need to know as time goes by. Now, from a from a gaming standpoint, though, my question is this: um, you have to be, I would think, and I'm just asking, um, a pretty sophisticated gambler to understand the concept of in-game betting. I would think that that's not where you want to start your gaming career.
No, that's absolutely true. And the dirty little secret about in-game odds is, generally speaking, they are never as favorable as pre-game odds. So
Sure.
if you wanted to back, if we're talking about our hypothetical Thursday night game there between the Bengals and the Jaguars,
Hmm.
if you wanted to take the Bengals minus 7.5 points, you are going to lay minus 110, which simply in layman's terms means for every $11 you bet, you're going to receive 10 back. Obviously, that's how the books make their money. All right. So if you're going to do that in game, you're probably going to pay somewhere in the minus 115, even up to minus 118 or minus 120.
Hmm.
So they are sort of penalizing you for giving you that information. So now you have a quarter's worth of information to make your bets on. You know
Hmm.
who's playing, you know who's injured, you know who's off to a good start.
Hmm.
So the privilege of utilizing that information to inform your wager, you're paying extra money. So that is where a novice can certainly run into problems making too many in-game wagers. You definitely you're not getting the great price, because at minus 110 you basically have to win more than 52.38% of your bets. Everybody thinks, well, if you win half the time, you break even. That's not how it works in wagering, because you're paying the vigorage, the vig, the juice. You're
Right.
paying that extra money over and above the amount that you're going to win back. And in live game wagering, that vig, that juice, it is higher. So you have to really be careful making in-game wagers, and it is obviously, it's not something that I would recommend as a novice bettor,
Hmm.
but it is certainly something that these companies would love to see novice bettors get involved with.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you. We get a lot of questions about with regard to if this is the we'll go back to the Jaguars and Bengals. By the way, the conversation that we're having right now about the Jaguars and the Bengals, this conversation we're having is probably more conversation about the Bengals and the Jaguars than they will get in the entire season. So
More
if you're
heat than
a
they're
fan,
gonna generate for the rest of the year,
right,
absolutely.
exactly. So if you're a fan of the Bengals or the Jaguars, you're welcome. Anyway, the situation with that is I get a lot of people say, "Well, I'm betting if I bet on if I want the Jaguars to win, right? And I take the Bengals and the points." You said the Bengals were what, a touchdown,
Little better than a touchdown. It was 7.5
yeah,
to 8.5, depending
7.5.
on when you got it, right?
Well, let's say for the sake of argument, 7.5.
Okay.
If I bet on Cincinnati at 7.5 points and they don't cover, do I win?
No, you do not.
And no, the answer is no, you don't. Uh, then there's well, okay, if I bet on, if I take the, um, if I take the Jaguars and the points, and it's a straight line bet, like it's a 6 point or a 3 point or whatever
Right.
game, and that's how it ends up at 3 points. Do I win?
Well, no.
Again, right? You have to exceed that number, or in the case of if you take the points, you have to hope that the other team exceeds that number.
Right.
You know, there's no such thing as a push when you're betting.
Not on half points. Now,
No.
with a whole point, if it was a straight 7,
Mhm,
then you will see ties like the Cincinnati game that ended up with the Bengals winning by a field goal. If
mhm,
you had Cincinnati -3, obviously that would be a push.
right. And so no, you didn't lose any money, but you didn't win any
Right. Everything's returned.
money. And that doesn't happen often, but it happens.
No, they don't like pushes. That doesn't help anybody. It makes the bettors unhappy. It makes the books unhappy. They like to see a resolution, no question about it.
So let's talk about if you were just going to start and say, look, and one of the things we want to say to everybody is, and I'm going to throw my rules out here and you tell me your rules as well, sir.
Okay.
Scott, my rule is if somebody comes to me and says, I really think it'd be fun to, you know, lay some money on a game. I'm like, okay, I'm going to give you a couple of pieces of advice. A, never bet if you can't afford it.
Okay.
Okay. If you can't afford to lose, don't bet. It's why it's called gambling. There's a chance, there's no such thing as a sure thing. You may lose. Okay. So if this is if you've got your grocery monies here or anything like that, fine, don't do it. Just like you would live with the lottery or anything else. Okay. You have a chance of losing. However, if it's just you have some pocket money and you feel lucky and you want to take a chance, that's fine. Okay. Go for it. But take your time and look into, go to some of the handicappers, see what they're saying. Don't go into this blindly, and never, ever, ever, ever bet with your heart, because that, you'll get your heart broken more often than not. But to some sage advice from your standpoint, always appreciate it.
I would say you've hit 2 of my top 3 rules.
Okay.
First of all, like any gambling endeavor, just like you said, if it's not entertainment money, if it's not extra money, if it goes for any other purpose, don't gamble it.
Hmm.
Just don't do it. And the thing you said about not betting with your head, if you're betting with a buddy, or if you have the
Sure.
availability to bet
Right.
in your state, you want to put $10 because you like the Dallas Cowboys, sure, knock yourself out, go ahead.
Mhm.
But if you're serious about it, if you're serious about making money, or if you really don't like to lose money, because you get guys like that. There's some guys that are affected more by losing
Mhm.
$10
Right.
than some of us would be by losing 4 figures. It's
Right.
just the way it is. But so absolutely don't let your head get involved, or your heart get involved, but with your head, not your heart. And the third thing that I would add is don't bet too many games. It is not
Mhm.
a volume business. It is not a quantity business. It is a quality business. And if you have a full slate of 50 college football games
Mhm.
on Saturday and you've only got 2 of them picked out that you like, that's fine. You're not in it for action. You're not in it for fun. You're in it to make money, and that happens a lot with TV games. The Jaguars Bengals is a great example because that's a game that if most people saw it on the Sunday card, if that was a 1 p.m. Eastern start time on
Right.
a random Sunday, very few people are going to be interested in playing that game unless they've identified an advantage. But it's a Thursday night nationally televised game. There's no other NFL action. people are jumping to bet on that game. So be careful. Just because it's widely disseminated, just because it's a national TV game, don't feel that you have to bet on every national TV game, because that's, in the long term, that's a losing strategy. Because other than the fact you want to keep your volume down, those lines are usually the sharpest because they have the most action. So those
Mhm.
lines, by the very definition, are the toughest to beat.
Mhm.
I love nothing better than finding those games down the card, and I'll share a tip with you, Jim. I'll throw in one for
Sure.
free. I
Very good.
have been fading the Presbyterian Blue Hose, an FCS school
Mhm.
that is a non-scholarship program that has started to compete with scholarship programs,
Mhm.
and they are non-competitive right now, but the odds makers haven't figured it out yet. Not enough people have bet on them or bet
Mhm.
against them to make them make that switch. So that has been a fantastic bet for 2 weeks in a row. Of course, now they're off as we speak. They are off this weekend, so I'm kind of heartbroken about that. But those are the kind of games that I look at it, and they're not on TV. They may be on ESPN Plus down the way. You might be able to watch them a little bit. For the most part, they're not on TV, and I don't care. I don't time that I'm watching games. It's generally wasted time that I could be using to handicap.
It's funny you bring that up. That one of the first uh, people I spoke to in early in my career, who was a sports gambler, and he, he worked obviously in the broadcast industry, but he was seriously successful at it. Told me that he picked three games a weekend, and he never picked any game that was either on TV, and obviously in those days there wasn't as many games on TV.
Right.
And more often than not, he picked either games in the Ivy League or the Patriot League,
It's fantastic.
and
Yes,
that's where he
absolutely.
stood. He bet three games. Maybe one time it would be Bucknell and Lafayette. Maybe the other time it might be Colgate and Penn, or it might be Harvard and Dartmouth. Um, but those were his games, or his teams and his leagues. And he said, you know, I'm never going to bet on a game that I'm watching between Alabama and Texas A&M.
Right.
I'm not going to do Ohio State and Wisconsin, because for me that's not that that's not a wise thing. And so you do you do find that, as you just gave us that little nugget, you do find that there's more certainty in some of these smaller conferences than there are in the Power Five, or what we all consider, quote unquote, the games of the week.
There's no question about that. Now, sometimes I would put this caveat on there. I will bet those games if I have identified an inefficiency. If the public is all over Alabama, oh, it's Alabama, they can't lose, they're going to cover. Sometimes the fact that it is a public game will drive inefficiencies that I'm able to exploit. So I would say never, but just because it's on TV, I would never use that as a criteria.
hmm it's funny. The other aspect is, excuse me, that people will, because people do the office pool stuff, and so that they're used to that kind of thing, where everything has to be in by Friday. But that is not the way that a professional handles it. Correct? I mean, you don't make a bet on a Sunday game uh, on Thursday.
It depends. If I've got a game that I think there's going to be movement that's going to go away from my position,
Uh huh.
earlier is the better. A lot of times you can make great bets on a Monday or Tuesday for the upcoming NFL weekend. But once that window passes, then the best time to make it is a lot of times right at game time, just like you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
There is a last second inefficiency that develops, and you're able to exploit that. You like the edge on the other side, and you can absolutely make that play right before game time. So if you don't get the best of it, if that line moves, 3 or 4 points from Monday to game time,
Mm-hmm.
it is one of the hardest things to do because sometimes you've missed that movement. Now you're chasing those points. You could have got a better number 3 days ago, and
Hmm.
your the temptation is to say, "Well, that 3 points isn't that big a deal. I still like the Bears, so I'm going to bet the Bears even though it's 3 points worse than it was on Tuesday."
Right.
That is a long-term losing strategy because every half point matters. Every extra 5 cents line move matters. Those things are going to be long-term killers to your bankroll.
Hmm. You know, with regard to that, you've got what you just said, the early. I mean, the when the line is set, right? That's when you look at it and go, wait a minute, they're giving in your professional head, you're going, wait a minute, they're giving away too much here, or maybe they're not giving away enough.
Right.
So that's why you're saying sometimes early in the week is better than waiting till last minute.
Yes, correct.
So the um, the other thing that I think is interesting too is that you know oftentimes that last minute situation becomes a um, critical because you get injuries, and there are teams who are notorious for putting half the team on the injured list. And
Patriots.
yeah, exactly. I was going to say the same thing. And then come game time, it's going to be a game time decision. And by the game time, you know, you had 7 guys on that list, and now 6 of them are ready to play.
Right.
And so, or they didn't practice this week or all that, and you're like, and then bing, all of a sudden here they come.
Yeah, in the NFL, injuries have to be released an hour and 15 minutes
Right.
before game time. That's your
Mhm.
official inactive list. So there is a lot of line movement. There is a lot of wagering once that final injury list comes out. So that's going to be your final window to get it in good. And where professional sports bettors have an advantage is sometimes they pay attention to more inside information. Maybe they have a
Right.
source. Maybe they are just kind of keeping their finger on the pulse of that particular team and that injury. And there's a little bit of art involved with the science as well. You
Mhm.
sometimes have to read the tea leaves. What's the coach saying on Wednesday?
Mhm.
What's his record when talking about players with injuries? And
Mhm.
you have to kind of churn all that. You have to factor that all in when you're making your plays and you're making your best guess.
Well, and also you take into account how, let's say, we'll use um, a Ben Roethlisberger for illustration. Um, short of being decapitated for some reason, even if when he's on the injured list, Ben Roethlisberger shows up. Um, he's one of those guys where you're pretty sure that even though he's on, the list, he's going to play.
Right.
And then there's other guys who, show up on the list, and the moment you see their name, you're like, this guy's not going to play. I mean, it's just he doesn't heal quickly, or he
Right.
does. There's something in his mind he just does not want to. If it's not right, it's like a Stradivarius. I mean, in my mind, that's a guy in baseball like Steven Strasburg. Okay, when Steven is going to pitch and he's in the zone, he's fine. But if there's the least little bit of something that bothers him, it throws him totally off, and he doesn't pitch at all. And so you have to be careful with the Stradivarius, just like you have to be careful with the guy who's got the rubber arm who could pitch, 6 games in a row.
Right. Yep,
So
that's absolutely correct. You guys, you've nailed it. You have guys like that for whatever reason they seem to be injury prone. If it's a pitcher, it's an elbow, it's a shoulder, it's a core injury. Whatever it is. Now, with Ben, for example, you're
mhm,
right. He's a gamer. He's going to go. He's going to get out there and he's going to start every single game that he can walk upright, basically. But then you have to factor in what percentage of Ben Roethlisberger are we actually going to get?
right.
If he's 70%, how do you factor that in? And
Mhm.
maybe if he has a shoulder injury, they're going to run the ball more, so that's going to
Right.
affect how you would play the totals and things. So that it all factors in. It all has
Mhm.
to go into the equation.
It's funny. We were talking again about how this whole thing generates, right? How we all get to this point, and how leagues have decided, or they weren't going to do it. Brent Musburger tells a great story. Told me one time about they went to a meeting with Pete Rozelle. This is before the NFL and CBS had just started, and they hired Jimmy the Greek. So the Greek and Brent go, over from CBS, which is West 52nd Street, over to the Park Avenue offices of the NFL. And Rozelle was not adverse to gambling. He was, however, very um, protective of how the Greek was going to present this. And for those of you old enough, what happened is there used to be a little board, and what would happen is there'd be offense, defense, special teams, intangibles, blah blah blah, and Greek would give a green check to it if he thought that who had the advantage. He'd give the green check to the team with the advantage. So the Greek throws like 1,000 different hypotheticals at Rozelle, and Rozelle, finally gets totally exasperated by it, and she said, "Look, if you think a team is a deadlock, then put seven, put seven checks by it and one check for the other team or whatever, right? Just make it so blatantly obvious that it's impossible for these people not to understand." So, in one way, the commissioner was doing his best to say, "Okay, this is your lock, but you can't say it's a."
Right. Yep. That's absolutely true. And there's always been a wink and a nod. And sometimes if you'll have a game situation, even before gambling was embraced, for those in the know, they would know by a comment that they would make, and usually it'd be a late game touchdown or some kind of late game swing. And the commenter would say something cagey like, "Well, there's going to be a lot of people interested in that last touchdown," or something to those terms.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, um, it really does have a tendency to make you need to pay attention. But at the end of the day, it also doesn't hurt. And you're my buddy with winners and whiners there. It's shameless plug time. So tell me, you know,
Beautiful.
about what you got going, where we can find you on social media, and of course, all the information you talk about right here will be in the show box below. But let's chat about where people can get some information from you.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I work for one of the greatest prediction websites that is around right now. And in my humble opinion, I believe it is the best. It is winnersandwhiners.com. The great thing about them, they do full write ups on every game that's scheduled in North America, the professional leagues, every single day. And they make previews, predictions. A lot of times you'll find sites that just give the information, they don't actually make a pick. It's not really helpful to to the majority of people that want to know how they should make their plays. So that's what I like. It's a great site. We've got great handicappers and writers as well. So you can always check out winnersandwhiners.com if you're looking for a second opinion on anything that you would like to make a wager on. As far as myself, my partner and I, Scott Reichel, we do a show each and every day that you can pick up on YouTube, or you can pick it up via your favorite podcast dissemination platform called Winners and Whiners Radio. Although I think we are probably going to rebrand that here in the very near future. So stay tuned for that. But we do a show roughly an hour long every day where we go through our favorite plays of the day, and then we do individual shows for the top 25 college teams and all of the NFL games as standalone videos and podcast over the weekend. Finally, if you want to find me On the Twitter, you can get me at Steehn Roller, and that is STEEHNROLLER. You can find me on Twitter, and I'm happy to respond to any questions. If you have questions about individual games or gambling strategy, I'm happy to get to your question and answer it.
Scott, thanks a lot for joining us, and all the information on Scott, winners and whiners, and all that's going on with the group will be in the show box below. We'll be back with more of Stream On with Jim Williams right after this from BMW, the ultimate driving machine.
At BMW, we know leaving the road wasn't easy, but anticipating our return taught us to appreciate every drive. The exhilaration of the ultimate adventure. Moments spent with your favorite co-pilots. And the freedom to explore just because. Our time to rejoin the road is finally here.
Welcome back, everybody. Now, if you're not one of the over 75,000 people worldwide who've downloaded our podcast on a weekly basis or subscribed, well, first of all, shame on you. Second of all, we make it simple. You can find us on the Apple Podcast Store. You can find us at Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, as well as Google Play. You can find us at YouTube, TuneIn, Radio, iHeartRadio, to name a few, or wherever, as they say, you find your podcast. Now, if you have an assistant device like, say, Alexa or Siri or Google, all you have to do is ask them, hey, please play the latest edition of Stream On with Jim Williams, and they'll do it. Okay, now, if you still can't find us, don't worry. Pull out the old Google machine, type in Stream On with Jim Williams, hit the favorite button or the subscribe button, and each week you're going to get a brand new edition of the podcast sent directly to your phone, to your tablet, or to both. So please do that for us. Today, we greatly would appreciate having you part of our family, okay? All right. Two big premieres this week. The Sopranos prequel on HBO Max, The Many Saints of Newark. And now this has been one of the most anticipated new shows out there. It's, from a standpoint, it's a movie. Everybody loved The Sopranos. And this is a prequel to The Sopranos. It's The Many Saints of Newark. We will have a full review on it next week, but I know from all the buzz that you guys have been putting out there, this is a show you've been waiting for, and it is now dropped last night on HBO Max. So the Soprano prequel, The Many Saints of Newark. Now, if you do subscribe to HBO Max, you can binge all the Sopranos if you want to prior to seeing The Many Saints of Newark, or you can go the other way and watch The Many Saints of Newark and then binge The Sopranos. So either way, it's a good result. Okay, cool. All right, now another show that everybody loves, The Morning Show, with friend of the podcast Steve Carell and Jennifer Aniston, has returned, with, of course, Reese Witherspoon, can't forget her. By all means, an outstanding program. And you see Jennifer Aniston in a totally different light in this show. It's a dramedy, but it's also quite clever and well written. And we're happy to see back on Apple Plus, The Morning Show. So by all means, check it out. Now, your assignment last week was to find us the top 5 comfort TV shows. Now, these were shows that were airing in the 1960s and then became part of pretty much everybody's life because they lived forever in reruns. And so here's our top 5 voted on by you all. Here we go. Number 1 on that comfort TV list. Now remember, this is comfort TV. Something easy to watch, not a problem. And by the way, these are all available on 3 different free services: FETV, which is Real Family Entertainment, and of course IMDb, as well as, of course, the Roku channel. So these 5 that you guys brought to me can all be found there. All right, first up, Leave It to Beaver. All right, the Beav and Wally. And, of course, Eddie Haskell showed up at number 1. Number 2, Bewitched. It was Montgomery. Number 3, Perry Mason. Number 4, the Beverly Hillbillies. And number 5, Mannix, which I was kind of surprised. Number 6 on the list, and that would have been, actually, I would have moved it up personally, but that was the Rockford Files. So thanks for participating in this week's little, get together on what kind of comfort food that you watch in the way of television. It's kind of like your mac and cheese TV, all right? Thank you so much for that. Now, if you are a big sports fan, we did talk about sports gaming this week. You're going to watch tonight. I'm sorry, not tonight. I apologize. Sunday night, you're going to be able to watch the return of Tom Brady to Foxborough, Massachusetts. Now, I'm guessing that we're going to see perhaps not only is it going to be a big rating number, I believe it will probably be, because it's also airing on Peacock, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that the return of Tom Brady and the Buccaneers to Foxborough and to New England is probably going to rate out as the highest Sunday night football game in history, and certainly the highest Sunday night football game ever streamed. So we'll see, but that's going to be starting 7 p.m. for the pregame show Eastern time on NBC and Peacock. Then, of course, the game itself with our good friend Al Michaels, Chris Collinsworth, and the gang calling the action. Kickoff is at 8:20 Eastern. And then, of course, the post game, all on NBC and on Peacock. So by all means, do not forget to mark your calendar if you're a sports fan. All right, folks? Okay, super. Have a wonderful and safe week. Those of us here at Stream On with Jim Williams are happy to have had the opportunity to visit with you today. We'll see you next time when we talk with the folks at Paramount Plus next week about some really cool programming that are coming down the line. Okay, so Paramount Plus next week right here on Stream On with Jim Williams. Until that time, have a wonderful and safe weekend.